It's funny, I actually think I've got the best CIO job in the world, so I guess it's all a question of perspective, isn't it? How to start? I guess, how many of you thought that you were going to hear some crazy guy from Silicon Valley who probably plays Frisbee or something and is going to recommend totally impractical things funded by venture capitalists, all of you? Yeah, okay. I'm glad we have the honesty. It's a good place to start. I think the reality of it is I'm more like you than you might think, and our roles are far more similar than you might think. And first of all, about me, I spent 13 years in big enterprise IT, most of my career, very much kind of something that shaped me. And then secondly, I think that the realities of being a CIO are really universal in any enterprise. And let me share what some of them are, and hopefully this will resonate with you. But first, I think the thing that dominates all of our lives as CIOs is the cost element of our role, right? And which is that we typically spend years paying off our decisions, right? And it's not uncommon to find that you move into a CIO role and you're actually going to spend the majority of your budget paying for the predecessor's decisions, not even your own, right? So which is, it's kind of a dampener, isn't it, right? You move into the job and discover how much the role of the costs are in it. And then secondly, there's this phenomenon in the enterprise that I say, enterprise IT ends up being like what I call a technology roach motel. Applications go in, but they don't come out. I remember in a job that I once had, we were going to cut costs. We made the big annual effort to decommission applications, and we put up an application decommission wall of fame. And 9, 10, 11 months later, the wall looked the same as it did on day one, empty, and we repurposed the wall for something else. But these things are true everywhere. It has nothing to do with where you sit. This is just what IT is like. But these aren't the reasons why we got into IT, why we wanted to be technologists, is it, right? We came into this because we wanted to innovate. We understood and had an appreciation for technology and what it could do, and we wanted to bring it to our enterprise, to our organization. And when I think of that irony and kind of the price we pay for innovation, I'm reminded of the Greek myth of Prometheus, the Titan who brought fire to man, right? And I think we all got in this business to bring fire to our organizations, to our enterprises, that greatest and most primary and potent of all tools. But then I think we often find ourselves with perhaps a certain self-sympathetic air, a little bit like Prometheus in that chained to a rock and tortured for all eternity as a result of having the hubris to try to bring technology, innovation to mankind. But so I think on that rather grim and somber note, it's useful to step back and think, why do we have IT in our organizations at all? What is so special about IT and the role of it? And I think this is very much a self-motivating thing for me. I deeply, deeply believe, I think we all probably believe why we're here, that's why we're here, that there's the opportunity, the fusion of the deep understanding of the mission and particulars of our organization, coupled with an intimate understanding of technology, allow for things that would be not possible in no other ways, and create the opportunity for us to wield the hammer of technology to transform our organizations and differentiate them, whatever the organization's mission is and whatever that role is, and that people on the inside at the center of our organizations wielding technology on behalf of that organization occupy this unique in history, unique in time, unique opportunity. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind of what IT is about, and kind of hopefully at some level why we're all here. So, but to bring it back to Google and my crazy employer, I think wanted to spend some time sharing with you some approaches that we take to how we do IT at Google, how we think about bringing more innovation to bear. It's really just a few very simple things. It has much to do with culture and attitude than it does with crazy spendthrift ways or anything like that. And these are all ideas that scale up and scale down and can be appropriate for any enterprise at all and any IT shop. So the first kind of leg of innovation for us at Google in IT is about the culture of having a problem-solving philosophy, right? And I think actually the best way of thinking about this is that the root of it is in this culture that it's a young company, and many of the people in the company can remember being a very small startup where survival was a day-by-day matter, right? And that's really produced this deeply ingrained culture that at Google, everybody's problems are everybody's problems, right? The boundary around you in the org chart doesn't define what you're there for. It does define, obviously, some of what you're there for, but it doesn't end with that. And secondly, we take that culture on top of that culture of shared problem, and we have a very, very explicit aim of trying to hire people with natural problem-solving abilities, skills, inclinations. This is people who, even in non-software development roles, we often hire people who have some level of software development experience or skill, or maybe are just power users in technology, right? But people who have some ability to bring a problem-solving approach to their day-to-day work is something. These are people that we look for. The third thing, which you might have all heard about as part of this problem-solving philosophy, is we do have this construct called 20% time. But what you should really, it gets described as a lot of things. That's really a vehicle, a way for saying that we want people to worry about problems other than the problems of their role. And there's a lot of structure around it that tends not to get described in the press, for example. But let me give you a story about how 20% time has kind of changed IT at Google. It's a small story, but illustrative, right? So one of my organization's responsibilities is HR systems and staffing systems. We have a custom-written applicant tracking system, which comes from the fact that we receive millions and millions of job applications a year and have very unusual thoughts about the hiring process. So a woman, a new engineer who'd started at Google, soon after she started at Google, got involved in the hiring process, as many, many people do. And she realized that she didn't like the way that the hiring system represented how we were scoring candidates. It kind of lacked any sort of visual flair. It was just plain numbers. And so, inside Google, we take an open source approach to how we write software. Any employee at Google can see almost any of the source code to almost any of the software that we have at Google. She found the source code to the applicant tracking system, and she added the changes to put visual spark lines in to represent how candidates had done in their interviewing process. Simple. She got it reviewed and approved by the people who were actually responsible for the application in question. 2 weeks later, everyone at Google who was involved in the hiring process was looking at this new graphical visual representation of candidates, and I was getting nice notes from my fellow VPs and so on about how much better the applicant tracking system had got and how useful this was, right? And I think this kind of echoes all these things: a problem-solving approach and hiring people and inculcating this notion that our problems are really all of our problems and giving people some opportunity to actually work on that. I think it's important that I mention, first of all, that we do also have a certain tolerance. Not every project has to be a huge project of enormous impact or enormous scope to gather someone's volunteering to spend some time on it. And we have a certain tolerance as well for ideas that might fizzle or might not be huge, enormous, gazillion-dollar successes or something like that. That's kind of part of what taking on this problem-solving philosophy means. And really important, I think for you all to understand that it does scale up and scale down. We call it 20% time, but I read a great article about how I think NPR was having brainstorming days or brainstorming sessions where they brought their employees together and thought about what the biggest problems were and came up with ideas that got kind of thought about and analyzed and bubbled up and turned into actual organizational initiatives. A number of these ideas turned into organizational initiatives. Taking a day or a half day to do that kind of thing is something almost any outfit can afford to do. Or I've also heard a lot of stories about small, lean startups doing things like having bureaucracy buster lunches. People over sandwiches talk about what they think the biggest problems are to the company that they're not working on, and to the organization that they're not working on, and they come up with ideas. This is really about culture. What it means is embracing the fact that ideas can come from anywhere. They don't have to come from people in a particular box in your org chart. And once you embrace that idea, that ideas can come from anywhere, they do come from anywhere. So don't limit your expectations for your employees, but seek to give them challenges wherever they may lie and ignite their passion in whatever the problems that your outfit has are. So the second leg of kind of where the innovation comes from in IT at Google, I think, is this notion of cloud first. And I think this is something where the federal government, you all have shown a tremendous amount of leadership. For us, what this means is 3 years ago, I made what at the time was a somewhat controversial decision that we would go cloud first at Google, and the first choice hosting environment for every application that we wrote would be Google App Engine, which is our commercial application hosting environment. And this was controversial, and there was a lot of pushback from within my own organization about it. It was kind of hard to move the culture. I'll tell you more about that. But it's produced enormous benefits. I'll give you a case in point. We have an in-house built employee performance management system used to do the 360-degree employee review process that's kind of also very much part of our company culture, used by everyone in the company. When I arrived at Google 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, this system ran on a dozen plus servers and multiple data centers for redundancy and so on, and required the efforts of up to 4 system administrators to keep it going. And of course, we had to design it to run at the peaks of, because the reality performance reviews is everyone submits them about 5 minutes before midnight on the day that they're due, right? And so you have to build for that amount of capacity for the performance review system, even though you use it for 5 minutes. It's kind of it's not just the peak in capacity, it's the peak in CIO frustration to see that kind of allocation of resources. In any event, we rewrote the performance review system for a bunch of reasons to run on App Engine. It's running now for all of the company on App Engine. Even as we speak, we're in a performance review cycle. It has 0 system administrators running it. It scales up and scales down with load and with demand without us having to do anything. We didn't have to do any capacity planning for it. There is virtually 0 operational cost for running the application. It just goes on and kind of runs itself. The other thing I should point out is that if I look at kind of how this application would get billed back to us, and more or less what we would pay to use this application, to use for the hosting of the application, is about what you'd pay to power a traditional data center in a typical a traditional server in a traditional corporate data center. So for 1 year. So 1 year, 1 server, about what we're paying to run performance review for the entire company, which previously took many more. And we don't have to worry about patching these machines or network upgrades or data center availability. All that stuff is taken care of for us. What's really happened with going cloud first is that we've kind of put a wooden stake through the heart of this notion that every decision we make has an infinite future cost. The future costs of this application are minimal. So I think the other thing I wanted to mention about this is I did get a bunch of pushback, right? So generally our organizations, our developers and so on are well versed in the path and the approach to building applications that run on a traditional enterprise IT stack. And we have to be much more pioneers about how we deliver applications into the cloud, right? It's a reality for my people as well as it is for yours that our key assets are still inside our data centers. The data and services and systems that we care about are still there. So it's not easy, but just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's worth doing. It doesn't mean, whoa, that didn't come out right. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing. In fact, it's very worth doing. Being able to kill this application roach motel phenomenon that I was telling you about has been, I'd say, the single best decision that I've made in my tenure at Google. So the third leg of this approach to innovation that I was telling you about that I think Google has and I think is followable is by all, is the idea of giving user choice, right? So the technology landscape has emerged so much since I entered it now many, many years ago in the last century, right? The people who are joining our organizations are already experts in some technology set that they can use to be productive. And we view our role as an IT department to be giving them the tool set that they can be most productive with, right? So as a result, we support Mac OS and Windows and Linux on the desktop and laptop at Google. This doesn't mean, though, that when we also give choice of personal productivity software or whatever the package is that you want to use to be most productive with, not without limits, but we provide support for the most common 3 or 4. Now, this does not mean, there's a few things that this doesn't mean that I want to clear up. First of all, security is paramount, right? I think that we deeply believe you have to invest in security, and we definitely invest in security for the platforms. What that means is we don't allow people to bring their own computers to work and we'll make them work. We do enterprise-approved SKUs of hardware, right, that we test and certify and purchase at significant corporate discounts. And we have certified versions of operating system builds that we manage and deploy ourselves. So it's a managed environment, it's a controlled environment. And the other part of the security approach here in providing user choice is that we go in and use our technologists to fill in the gaps that come in the platforms. An example of this, it's a great story about the cloud actually, is we didn't think that software update and patching and operating system and update and patching were where they needed to be on the Mac platform. And as a result, we built a system called Simeon, which we use to do operating system and application installs, updates, and patches to our entire corporate fleet of tens of thousands of Macintoshes. It runs on App Engine. It's another one of these perfect App Engine apps because you don't want to have an entire fleet of servers inside your data center that you use solely for, that are only busy the 1 or 2 days a month when you need to deploy patches. And with cloud hosting, you don't have to. You only pay for the server capacity that you use when you actually got a patch to deploy. Also, because App Engine is connected to the internet and our users with their Macs, which are mostly laptops, are on the internet an awful lot, we can patch and update these Macs almost no matter where they are. Patch them when the user's in a hotel or in a conference, or in an airport, or working from home, as they often do, right? Of course, most laptops spend more time outside the enterprise walls than inside the enterprise walls, and we can patch them and make them up to date with security patches and configuration changes, no matter where they are. So as a little plug, Simeon is open source software we've released. It's available on code.google.com. It runs on App Engine. You're more than welcome, if you're interested in supporting Macintoshes, I would recommend you take a look at it. It's available to all. So concluding, I talked to you about the 3 legs upon which we're able to do things that were hard to do in other IT shops, for me at least, right? And I think it's important for all of us as CIOs, we get so used to the cost equation and to the caution that comes from that, to thinking about why shouldn't I? And I think that, but if you want to innovate, you need to ask yourself the question, how can I, right? How can I create a culture of problem solving in my organization? How can I move to the cloud and use the cloud first? And how can I give my users choice and allow my users to use the technology with which they can be most successful because it's already something that they know? And I think if you ask yourself these questions and figure out where and how you can apply these principles, what you'll find, to return back to the analogy of Prometheus earlier, is that these guidelines will help you in the same way that Heracles helped Prometheus. Heracles cut Prometheus's chains and freed him from the rock upon which he was chained. And I think that if you think about these approaches to innovation, you can achieve the same successes in your own organization. It doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require being a crazy Silicon Valley company. It's about a change in attitude. Thank you all very much.